All right, so we're gonna kind of keep rolling with the idea of existentialism, right? So we're gonna start out with for Bishop. We're gonna start out with the Man-Moth. It's on page 55 if you've got the book. If you need to, just search it on Google. If you don't have the book, right, you can pull it up on some kind of poetry website, I'm sure. So, the reason why I also am going to categorize some of Bishop's poems here as, works of existentialism is, we'll start by looking at Man-Moth, okay? And this is a strange poem, right? And intentionally so. So, it's really a poem that says, well, what does it mean to be a regular person, right? Is anyone really normal? Is a person who might be considered an outcast or a stranger or foreign or anything like that? Are they any more or less normal than you or me, right? So a little bit of biography goes into this poem as well. Bishop was adjusting to the big city life, right? She was adjusting to living in New York City. Um, as I mentioned before in class, I think maybe subconsciously, right? I don't really have any kind of true um, method or system for selecting texts, but um, it's like I notice after I, just go down the list and pick a text that uh, more often than not, the ones I pick actually kind of will overlap or connect to each other in one way or another. Because Man-Moth, right? I feel like we see our Man-Moth here being kind of in the same situation as our narrator from Invisible Man is, especially in that prologue, right? We're both talking about uh, subjects who are living basically underground in New York City, right? So connections I don't even quite realize when I'm selecting the text, but when I put them side by side for a lesson, I'm like, oh wow, we have a connection here, right, between Man-Moth and our Invisible Man, right? So maybe something you can write about in your exam question, right? um, if you're taking notes, right? I always say if you're taking notes, you might want to take a note on that. Okay. So let's look at some lines here from Man-Moth. Okay, the Man-Moth. before we do, right? Keep in mind that idea of what does it mean to be a regular person, right? Is Man-Moth any more or less strange than the average person you see on the street? Is Man-Moth the average person you see on the street? What kind of similarities do you see between Man-Moth and Invisible Man? Questions, right? Questions to keep in mind before you start reading. So let's look at the opening stanza in this poem. Here above, cracks in the buildings are filled with battered moonlight. I just love that image. I really like that image. The whole shadow of man is only as big as his hat. It lies at his feet like a circle for a doll to stand on, and he makes an inverted pin, the point magnetized to the moon. He does not see the moon. He observes only her vast properties, feeling the queer light in his hands, neither warm nor cold, of a temperature impossible to record in thermometers. But when the Man-Moth pays his rare, although occasional, visits to the surface, similar to our Invisible Man, right, from Ellison's novel, the moon looks rather different to him. He emerges from an opening under the edge of one of the sidewalks and nervously begins to scale the faces of buildings. He thinks the moon is a small hole at the top of the sky. Again, I love the imagery in this poem. Proving the sky quite useless for protection. He trembles but he must investigate as high as he can climb. Up the facades, his shadow dragging like the photographer's cloth behind him, he climbs fearfully, thinking that this time he will manage to push his small head through that round, clean opening and be forced through as from a tube in black scrolls on the light. Man, standing below him, has no such illusions. That's in a parenthetical there, okay? But what the Man-Moth fears most, he must do. Although he fails, of course, and falls back, scared, but quite unhurt. Then he returns to the pale subways of cement he calls his home. Yes, sorry. He flits, he flutters, and he cannot get aboard the silent trains fast enough to suit him. The doors close swiftly. The Man-Moth always seats himself facing the wrong way, and the train starts at once at its full, terrible speed, without a shift in gears or graduation of any sort. He cannot tell the rate at which he travels backwards. Each night he must be carried through artificial tunnels. Sorry, my cat just jumped on the desk. Sorry about that. Artificial tunnels. Artificial tunnels and dream recurrent dreams. Just as the ties recur beneath his train, these underlie his rushing brain. He does not dare look out the window, for the third rail, the unbroken drought of poison, runs there beside him. He regards it as a disease he has inherited susceptibly to. He has to keep his hands in his pockets, as others must wear mufflers. If you catch him, hold a flashlight to his eye. It's all dark pupil, an entire night itself, whose haired horizon tightens as he stares back. That's really good writing right there, and closes up the eye. From then the lid's one tear, his only possession, like the bee's sting, slips. Slyly he palms it, and if you're not paying attention, he'll swallow it. However, if you watch, he'll hand it over, cool as from underground springs and pure enough to drink. 1935. Good. So the other one I want you to look at from Bishop, they're all good, of course, but they're all good, and she has a lot in here, is In the Waiting Room, which is on 66, okay? This one has a child who we can, say is, maybe a fictionalized version of Bishop from when she was little, but at the dentist office with her aunt, right? So this is a unique poem. We get, this child's interpretation. She's 6, about to turn 7, of what it's like to be just left in this waiting room at the dentist office while her aunt is getting a procedure done. Okay. So I want you to look at this poem on your own, but I do want to draw attention to one line. It's at the bottom, so it goes from 67 into 68. So here at the bottom of 67, this starts at about line 54. I said to myself, 3 days, and you'll be 7 years old. I was saying to stop it, the sensation of falling off the round, turning world into cold, blue-black space. But I felt, you are an I. You're an Elizabeth. You are one of them. Why should you be one, too? I scarcely dared to look to see what it is I was. I gave a sidelong glance. I couldn't look any higher. At shadowy gray knees, trousers and skirts and boots and different pairs of hands lying under their lamps. I knew that nothing stranger had ever happened, that nothing stranger could ever happen. Why should I be my aunt or me or anyone? Right? An existential 6-year-old. Okay. So look at Waiting Room. Of course, if you want to, any of the other poems that she has in here will also work. But heads up, spoiler, or I guess a treat for anyone that is watching this video. There will be specifically on the exam a question about Bishop's poetry and Theodore Ruthke. Okay, so just a heads up, and maybe a little sneak for anyone who is watching this video. So that's all I wanted to talk about in these updates. So please, watch these, take some notes, and be prepared for the third exam tomorrow morning. Okay, thanks, and send me an email. I know it's kind of last minute, but if anything comes up, if you have any questions, send me an email. I'll do my best to get back to you as quick as possible. Other than that, I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Thanks.